8,848 meters above sea level. Up here, the air is so thin that every breath feels like trying to inhale through a straw. The temperature drops to 40 below. The wind doesn't just blow, it tears you off your feet. And all of this happens on a slope where a single wrong step means falling into nothingness. Everest, the highest point on the planet, the dream of thousands of climbers, and the graveyard of hundreds of them. Picture this. You're moving up a narrow path, clinging to ropes, pushing through a snowstorm, and suddenly you see it. A body, frozen in place like a statue, the face covered in ice, the eyes open, staring straight at you. It's not the first body you've seen, and it won't be the last. Some have been here for decades, too high, too dangerous to bring them down. They remain where they fell, or where they sat to rest and never stood up again. Climbers give them names. Green Boots, Sleeping Beauty, the German Woman. What drives people to climb where every rock, every single step could be their last? Fame, ambition, the need to prove something to themselves or to the world, or simply the inability to stop when the summit is so close. September of 1979. A German expedition prepares to strike for the top of Everest. The team is strong, seasoned mountaineers, trusted Sherpas, the best gear. And among them, a married couple from Bavaria, Ghard and Hannelore Schmatz. She wants to make history, to become only the fourth woman to stand on the world's highest peak. On the 2nd of October, she does it. She reaches the roof of the planet, she celebrates, takes photos, and just a few hours later, she sits down on her backpack in the middle of a snowy slope and never gets back up. Her body stays at 8,300 meters for years. Everyone climbing toward the summit passes her. They see her face, her open eyes. She was the first woman Everest never gave back. And her story is more than the tragedy of one brave climber. It is a lesson about the fine line between dreams and self-destruction, about how sometimes coming down is not defeat. It is the only way to stay alive. To understand why Hannelore's story shocked the world, we need to step back for a moment, back to the 1970s. By then, hundreds of men had already stood on Everest, but only 3 women had made it to the summit. Just 3 in a quarter of a century since the very first ascent. The first was Junko Tabei from Japan, May of 1975. She survived an avalanche that nearly buried her entire team, yet still pushed on to the top. The second was Fantog, a Tibetan climber. September of the same year. She reached the summit with a Chinese expedition on the northern side. The third was Wanda Rutkiewicz from Poland, October of 1978. The only woman in her team, she climbed to the top on her own. 3 women in 22 years. Can you imagine? And then Germany entered the stage. For German mountaineering, the 70s were a time to prove something to the world. After the war, the country had spent decades rebuilding its reputation in every field: sports, science, culture. Mountaineering was no exception. German expeditions set out for the Himalayas one after another. Manaslu, Annapurna, Makalu, the 8,000ers, the ultimate league for any climber. And Germany wanted a place in that league. But Everest was different. It wasn't just the highest mountain. It was a symbol, an icon. Every nation wanted its flag at the top. And at the center of that ambition stood a couple from a small Bavarian town, Ghard and Hannelore Schmatz, husband and wife. Both experienced climbers, both driven by the same dream. They weren't just partners who hiked mountains together on weekends. They were a team. They had already faced storms, frost, near disasters. They had already stood on the summits of 7,000ers and 8,000ers, together. Ghard was calm and methodical, an engineer by training. He planned the routes, calculated the risks, checked the gear 3 times over. Hannelore was the opposite, energetic, fiery, with eyes that seemed to burn. She couldn't sit still. She craved movement, altitude, adrenaline. In 1977, they secured a permit for Everest. That wasn't just paperwork. It was a golden ticket. The line for an ascent stretched years ahead. Nepal's government handed out only a handful of permits, and the German expedition got their chance. But preparation takes time. You can't just grab a backpack and head for Everest. You need acclimatization, training climbs on other 8,000ers, and money, a lot of money. The Schmatz family begins to prepare. In 1978, they climb Manaslu, the 8th highest mountain in the world at 8,163 meters. They succeed without any trouble. Next comes Tirich Mir in Pakistan, 7,500 meters. Another success. Hannelore is in excellent shape, strong, resilient, determined. With every climb, her ambition grows. Then, in the spring of 1979, they take on Lhasa, the 4th highest mountain on Earth, standing 8,516 meters high. It rises right next to Everest, separated only by a pass. The team handles the route. Once again, Hannelore proves herself. She's on top, no pun intended. She handles it with strength and focus, and then comes the moment of truth. Autumn of 1979. The German expedition makes it official. They are going to Everest. The goal is not just to plant Germany's flag on the summit. The goal is to make Hannelore the 4th woman in history to stand on the world's highest peak. She is meant to be written into the record books, her name placed alongside Tabay, Fantog, and Rutkiewicz. Germany wants its heroine, and Hannelore is ready to become her. September of 1979. The German expedition arrives at Everest Base Camp. The team is international: Germans, Austrians, Americans, plus the experienced Sherpas, without whom Everest is simply not an option. This isn't a tourist outing, it's a serious mountaineering operation. Among them is a legend of American climbing, Ray Genet. He's 50 years old, practically ancient for Everest. But Genet is one of the strongest high-altitude climbers of his generation. He has already stood on other 8,000ers. He knows what the death zone is. He knows how to survive where the human body begins to tear itself apart. Hannelore looks at him with admiration. If someone like him is in the team, then everything must be fine. Ghard, meanwhile, checks the gear again and again. Oxygen bottles, tents, ropes, carabiners. Everything has to be flawless. At 8,000 meters, there's no room for guesswork. The first weeks are devoted to acclimatization. You can't just charge straight up. The body has to adjust to the altitude. Climbers go up to Camp 1, then descend, then to Camp 2, and back down again, then Camp 3, over and over. It's like training the lungs and the blood, teaching the body to work with the bare minimum of oxygen available up there. By the end of September, the team is ready. The weather looks good, the window is open, everyone is in excellent shape. Hannelore is full of energy. Ghard is calm and focused. But nature doesn't ask for permission. On the 28th of September, a storm slams into the mountain. Snow, wind, zero visibility. The tents shake violently in the gusts. Climbers sit zipped up in their sleeping bags and wait. 1 day, 2 days, 3. The storm doesn't let go. And that's dangerous. Every extra day at altitude drains the body. There's no recovery up here, only loss of strength. The longer you wait, the slimmer your chances of reaching the summit. Finally, on the 30th of September, the weather eases a little. The wind dies down. The team makes a decision, split in two. The first group will push for the summit immediately while there's still a window. The second will wait another day to be sure the weather has truly stabilized. Ghard joins the first group, together with several climbers and Sherpas. Hannelore stays behind in the second, with Ray Genet and Sundare Sherpa. At the time, the split seems logical, sensible. But that moment marks the point when everything starts to unravel. On the 1st of October, 1979, Hannelore Schmatz stands on the summit of Everest. He is 50 years old. That makes him the oldest person ever to reach the highest point on Earth. A record. At the time, it's a sensation. Imagine it, 50 years old, and you're standing on the roof of the world. In an era when climbing isn't about guided commercial trips with oxygen bottles waiting at every step. It's about risk, endurance, sheer will. But the euphoria doesn't last. He looks around. There's too much snow, far more than usual for this season. The storm has piled massive drifts onto the slopes. It's dangerous. Every step could trigger an avalanche. And then there's the time. It's already late. The sun is starting to sink. They need to descend. Immediately. On Everest, there is an iron rule. The turnaround time is 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It doesn't matter if you've reached the top or not. If the clock shows 2, you turn back. No discussion. Why? Because the descent takes just as long as the climb, sometimes longer. Legs are tired, reflexes slow, focus slips. If you linger too long on top, you'll be forced to descend in the dark, and darkness in the high mountains is almost a guaranteed death sentence. Gerhard knows this. He quickly turns around and starts heading down. On the way, his group crosses paths with the second team, Hannelore, Regine, and Tsundere Sherpa. They're still on their way up. Gerhard stops. He looks at his wife. "Too much snow," he says. "It's dangerous. You shouldn't go." Hannelore shakes her head. "We'll make it," she replies. Gerhard recognizes that look in her eyes. He knows it well. When she has made up her mind, nothing can stop her. "Then be careful," he says, "and don't stay too long at the top." The groups part ways. Gerhard goes down. Hannelore continues up. It is the last time he ever sees her alive. Gerhard's descent goes smoothly. He returns to camp exhausted, but safe. Everyone congratulates him. The oldest person ever to reach the summit of Everest. Back home, the German press is already preparing their headlines. But Gerhard doesn't celebrate. He keeps looking up, toward the slopes where his wife is climbing. He knows their time is running out. If they reach the summit now, the descent will be in darkness. And that means trouble. He waits, watches the ridge, hopes they'll change their minds, that they'll turn back, come down. But Hannelore does not return. Why didn't she turn around? That question will haunt Gerhard for the rest of his life. He warned her. He told her it was dangerous, that she shouldn't go. But Hannelore kept climbing. To understand her decision, you have to remember who she was. Hannelore grew up in Bavaria, in the foothills of the Alps. The mountains were part of her life from childhood, but for her, they weren't just scenery or a hobby. They were a challenge, a way to prove she could do more than anyone expected. In the 1970s, there were very few women in mountaineering. It was a man's world, harsh, unforgiving. Women had to fight twice as hard for even a fraction of respect. Hannelore knew that. And she didn't just want to be in that world. She wanted to leave her mark on it. When Junko Tabei summited Everest in 1975, Hannelore followed the news as if spellbound. The first woman on the roof of the world. It wasn't just a sporting achievement. It was a symbol, a statement. Women can do everything men can. And Hannelore wanted to be next. But Tabei had been first, then Fantog, then Rutkiewicz. By 1979, 3 women had already been there. Hannelore would be the fourth, not the first, not the second, the fourth. It might sound like a small detail. After all, her name would still be in the history books. She would still become a heroine. But to Hannelore, it mattered. She knows it. The further down the line, the less attention. The first will be remembered forever, the second and the third too. But the fourth, the fifth, the 10th? In a few years, women on Everest will be nothing unusual, and her name will blur into a long list. But here, in October of '79, she still has the chance to be a legend, to join that small circle of pioneers. There are only 3 so far. Soon, there will be 4. And this is her only shot. Because an expedition to Everest isn't a weekend trip. It takes years of preparation, tens of thousands of dollars, permits that take years to secure, logistics, a team, equipment. If she turns back now, the next attempt will be years away, if it ever comes at all. By then, dozens of women will have reached the summit, and Hannelore will be just another name in a crowd. No, she cannot retreat. Not now. Not when the summit is so close. Gerhard has already gone down. He has done his part. He is a hero. The oldest person to stand on Everest. And her? Just the wife of a hero? The one who lost her nerve and turned back? No. She will be a heroine too. And so, Hannelore keeps climbing. October 2nd, the day is sliding into evening. Her group moves slowly. There really is too much snow. Every step is a struggle. Regine breaks trail at the front. Tsundere Sherpa stays close to Hannelore, helping her push on. They cling to ropes, force their way through deep drifts. The hours slip by. 2 o'clock, the turnaround time. But the summit is near, just a little more. 3 o'clock, 4, 5. The sun sinks lower. The temperature drops. The wind picks up. And finally, at 6 in the evening, they reach the top. Hannelore stands on the roof of the world. 8,848 meters. There is nowhere higher. She has done it. The 4th woman in history. The 1st German. Regine hugs her. Tsundere Sherpa smiles. They pull out the flag, take photographs. A moment of triumph. Hannelore looks around. The horizon stretches without end. The clouds below form a soft, endless carpet. The peaks of other giants rise above it like islands. The sky overhead is dark, almost violet. She feels pride, euphoria, victory. This is her moment, her place in history. But the euphoria fades quickly. Ray checks his watch. 6:30. The sun is already touching the horizon. In 1 hour, night will fall. We have to go down, he says. Now. They start their descent, but time is against them. Every minute counts. Every second of delay is a step closer to disaster. On the way up, you're full of strength, full of determination. Adrenaline pushes you forward. You don't feel the exhaustion. You don't notice the cold. But on the way down, everything changes. The euphoria fades, the adrenaline drains away, and suddenly you realize you're spent. Your legs feel like they don't belong to you. Your fingers are numb, your head spins. Every breath is like trying to inhale through a wet cloth. Hannelore moves slowly, too slowly. Ray urges her on. Sundar Sherpa steadies her by the arm, but the altitude takes its toll. The body is at its limit. Every cell screams, no oxygen, no rest, no warmth. Darkness falls, first slowly, then all at once. The sun slips behind the horizon and the world sinks into twilight. On Everest, there are no city lights, no moon unless it rises, just darkness, absolute, heavy, impenetrable. They switch on their headlamps. Thin beams of light cut through the void, picking out snow, rock, rope, nothing else. The temperature plunges to 40 below. The wind rises. It lashes their faces, rips at their masks, forces its way under their jackets. Hannelore slows even more. She stumbles, falls, gets back up, falls again. "I'm tired," she says. "Come on, just a little more," Ray encourages her. Camp is close. But camp is not close. Camp 4 is still more than an hour away. And they don't have an hour. They barely have any strength left at all. They keep moving down, meter by meter, step by step, but night has already swallowed them. And with it comes a cold that does not forgive mistakes. 8,000 meters above sea level, climbers call it the death zone. And that's not a metaphor. It's a literal description of what happens to the body at that altitude. Picture this. You're at home, breathing normal air. Every breath carries 21% oxygen. Your lungs pull it in, your blood carries it everywhere. Brain, heart, muscles, everything works as it should. Now imagine standing at 8,000 meters. The oxygen here is cut to a third, only about 7% in every breath. It's like trying to breathe through 2 straws while holding your nose shut. Your lungs gulp the air desperately, but it's never enough. Your heart races, pounding harder and harder to push more blood. 120 beats per minute, 140, 160. But it doesn't help, because there simply isn't enough oxygen in the blood to deliver. And then the breakdown begins. The brain feels it first. Cells start dying. Thinking becomes foggy. Decisions come slowly, often badly. Reflexes fade. Muscles stop obeying. Legs buckle. Hands shake. Coordination unravels. The body starts eating itself alive, burning muscle tissue just to survive. You lose weight in front of your eyes, whole kilograms in a single day. And that's just the start. It only gets worse. The lungs begin to fill with fluid, pulmonary edema. You start drowning from the inside, coughing, wheezing, gasping for breath. The brain swells too, but the skull doesn't give. Pressure rises, hallucinations begin, delirium, blackouts, and then the cold. 40 below, 50 below. Winds strip away every trace of heat. Frostbite sets in within minutes. Fingers, toes, nose, ears, cheeks. First the fingers just go numb. Then they turn white, then black. The tissue dies, permanently. That's why it's called the death zone, because the human body was never built for this altitude. We're creatures of the lowlands. We need air, warmth, pressure. Up here, none of that exists. Every minute at this height is a step closer to death. Every hour cuts your chances of survival. Experienced climbers know you do not linger in the death zone. You go up, take your photo, and go down. Fast, no breaks. And you definitely don't spend the night. But Hannelore's group has no choice. They're descending in the dark. Their headlamps slice thin strips of snow out of the black. The wind howls. The cold cuts straight through to the bone. Hannelore stumbles, falls, again and again. "I can't go on," she says. Jenny stops, looks down the slope, then at her. He sizes up the situation. Camp 4 is still far away, too far. At this pace they won't reach it by morning, and moving in the dark on this slope is suicide. One step off the path, and you're gone. "We'll stop here," he decides. They're at roughly 8,500 meters, just below the south summit. The slope is steep, awkward, but they have no other option. They scrape out a small ledge in the snow, pull out their sleeping bags. They have no tent. It's back at Camp 4. They had planned to return there before nightfall, but they didn't make it. Now they'll have to spend the night in the open. At 8,500 meters, in 40, below cold. This is not a place for people. No one survives here. People die here. But this is where they spend the night. They crawl into their sleeping bags, press against each other, trying to hold on to whatever warmth they can. Jeanette is the most experienced climber of the group. He has been on 8,000ers before. He knows what extreme conditions are like. He knows how to stay alive. But even for him, this is too much. He is 50 years old. The body isn't what it used to be. Recovery is slower. The margin of safety is thinner. The night drags on endlessly. The wind never stops. It tears at the sleeping bags, slips inside, sucks out the last traces of heat. The cold spreads everywhere. First the feet go numb, then the hands. Then the whole body turns into one solid block of ice. Hannelore shivers. Sundar Sherpa shivers too. They try to move, to wiggle their fingers, to massage each other. Anything to keep the blood flowing. Jeanette lies still, too still. "Ray," Sundar calls, no answer. "Ray." Sundar shakes his shoulder. Janet doesn't respond. He is gone. A legend of American mountaineering. A man who had tackled some of the hardest routes on Earth. Who had taught others how to survive in the mountains. Frozen to death on the slopes of Everest. Imagine that horror. You're lying next to someone, trying to keep warm. And in the morning, you realize he isn't breathing, and you understand you could be next. Sundar and Hannelore are in shock, but shock quickly turns to panic. They need to go down, immediately, before they freeze too. They crawl out of their sleeping bags, try to stand. Their legs barely respond. Fingers are numb, hands refuse to bend. Sundar checks the oxygen bottles. Empty. The oxygen is gone. Now they have to descend without it. From 8,500 meters, after a night in the freezing dark, exhausted, frostbitten, at the edge of their strength. It's almost impossible, but they have no other choice. They leave Ray's body on the slope. They have to. They can't carry him. They can barely move themselves. The descent begins. Slow. Tortured. Every step an ordeal. Every breath a battle. No air, no strength, no warmth. Hannelore moves as if in a fog. Her head spins. Her vision darkens. Her legs buckle. Sundar holds her up, dragging her along. But he's at his limit too. They descend meter by meter, clinging to ropes, sliding over snow, falling, getting up again. And then comes the critical moment. At roughly 8,300 meters, Hannelore stops. "I can't," she says. "I can't go on." Sundar tries to pull her up, but she sits down on her backpack right in the middle of the slope, and she doesn't get back up. 8,300 meters, a snowy slope, morning of the 3rd of October. Hannelore sits on her pack, her back against a rock, her legs stretched out in front of her. She doesn't move. Sundar Sherpa stands beside her. He tries to lift her, pulls her hand, begs her to stand. "Please, we have to go. Just a little farther, just a little." Hannelore opens her eyes, looks at him. Her lips move. "Water," she whispers. These are her last words. They have water, but it's frozen, turned to ice inside the bottles. At this altitude, in this cold, everything freezes instantly. Sundar tries to melt the ice with the warmth of his own body, but his body is barely alive. His fingers won't bend. His hands tremble. He gives her a shard of ice. She puts it in her mouth, but she no longer has the strength to chew. Hannelore closes her eyes. Sundar sits beside her. He can't leave her. She's the wife of the expedition leader. His task is to bring her back alive, but she doesn't move. He waits. An hour, 2, hoping she'll recover, that after some rest they can continue the descent. But here, time is the enemy. Every minute steals life. Sundar feels the cold sinking deeper into him. If he stays longer, he will die too. It's the most terrible decision any rescuer can face. Stay and die with the person you're trying to save, or leave and try to survive yourself. Sundar makes his choice. He stands, looks at Hannelore one last time. She sits motionless, leaning against the rock, her eyes closed, her breathing barely there, and he begins the descent, alone. Every step is a torment. He falls, rises, crawls, slides across the ice. By evening, he reaches the camp, barely alive, his hands and feet blackened with frostbite. The doctors will do everything they can, but his fingers won't be saved. Sundare will lose several from his hands and almost all from his feet. That was the price of his survival, and Hannelore remained there, at 8,300 meters, sitting on her backpack, leaning against the rock. She had reached her goal. She had become the fourth woman to stand on the summit of Everest. She had entered the history books, but she never made it back. A few days later, the weather cleared. Other expeditions began their climb. The first climber to pass that spot saw a shape on the slope. At first, he thought it was just a rock or a snow-covered pack. He came closer and froze. It was a woman, sitting in the same position, her back against the rock, legs stretched out, hands resting on her knees, head slightly bowed. But the most chilling detail, her eyes. They were open, staring straight at the trail, as if she were still alive, as if she were only resting, about to stand up and continue. The climber stood there, unable to move. Then he realized it was Hannelore Schmatz, the German woman who had disappeared days earlier. He took a photo, kept climbing, told the others, and so began the legend of the German woman. For years, for decades, climbers on Everest passed by that place, and she was always there, sitting exactly where she had died, her body preserved by cold and wind, the skin dried and stretched tight over the bones, the clothing faded, torn by storms. But the pose never changed, and the eyes, those open eyes, staring at every climber who walked past. British mountaineer Ian Woodhall passed her in the mid-80s. Later, he would write, "The most haunting thing was the sense that she was watching you. You knew she was dead, but the eyes were open and it felt like she was observing." The famous climber Chris Bonington also mentioned her in his notes. The German woman was a grim landmark on the route. You passed her and thought, this is what happens if you stay up there too long. Can you imagine? She became a marker, a landmark. Climbers would say to each other, when you reach the German woman, turn right. Or, from the German woman, it's another 2 hours to camp. Her body became part of the route, part of the mountain. It sounds brutal, inhuman, but Everest has its own laws. Bringing a body down from 8,000 meters is almost impossible. It takes a team of porters, specialized gear, perfect weather, and a huge amount of money. And above all, it's deadly dangerous. Everyone who climbs that high is already risking their life. A body recovery makes it worse. You move slower, you carry weight, you burn energy faster. The odds of dying multiply. But in 1984, a German expedition decided to try. 5 years had passed. Hannelore's body was still there. Her family wanted her brought home, wanted her buried properly. A group of climbers and Sherpas made their way to the spot. The plan was simple: tie her with ropes and lower her down the slope. They reached her, began their work, wrapped her in rope, tried to lift. But her body had frozen into the rock, literally fused into the ice after 5 years. They chipped away, pulled, pushed, and then the weather turned. A storm slammed the mountain, visibility dropped to 0. The wind knocked men off their feet. The group had no choice but to retreat. They turned back in haste. 2 never made it down. One slipped during the descent and fell into the abyss. The other froze before reaching camp. 2 new lives lost for the attempt to recover one body. After that, no one tried to bring her down again. Too dangerous, too costly. Hannelore remained in her place, year after year, decade after decade. Every season, hundreds of climbers passed her. Some hurried by, avoiding her gaze. Others stopped, nodded silently, a mark of respect. And some even took photos. Yes, photos with her body in the background. It sounds grotesque, but for many it was a reminder. The mountain does not forgive mistakes. As the years went on, the wind and snow did their work. Her clothes fell apart completely. Her body took on the look of a mummy, but the pose never changed. and the eyes, they stayed open. Then, in the early 2000s, something strange happened. Climbers went up toward the summit, then came back down. They passed the spot where the German woman had always been. But she wasn't there. The place was empty. Only ropes stuck out of the ice, and a trace in the snow where the body had once rested. What happened? Did someone move her? Bring her down? No. Most likely, a powerful storm tore her from her place and hurled her down the slope. On Everest, hurricane winds can toss boulders, people, entire tents. After more than 20 years in the same spot, her body was finally blown away. Where did it fall? No one knows. Maybe into a crevasse, maybe under an avalanche, maybe to the bottom of a glacier where it will never be found. The German woman disappeared, but she remained in memory, in the stories, notes, and dreams of thousands of climbers. On Everest, the dead become guardians. They stand along the route, reminding the living that here, every step could be the last. And that raises the question so many ask, why not just bring them down? More than 300 bodies lie scattered across Everest. Some froze, some fell. Some sat down to rest and never stood again. They are there, in plain sight. Why doesn't anyone remove them? The answer is simple and brutal. It's almost impossible. First, the altitude. 8,000 meters is a place where a person can barely move under their own weight. Carrying anything more is nearly unthinkable. A body weighs 60, 70, 80 kilos. Imagine dragging that mass down a steep slope, where the air is a third of what it is at sea level, where every step is agony. It can't be done. Second, safety. To recover a body, you need a team. At least 10 people, Sherpas, climbers, all risking their lives. And too often, recovery missions end with new casualties. Remember the story from 1984. 2 men died trying to bring Hannelore down. 2 lives for 1 body. Third, money. Recovery costs tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars. Helicopters, equipment, payment for the team, and not every family can afford that. Besides, helicopters can't even fly that high. At best, they reach base camp, maybe Camp 1. Beyond that, it has to be done by hand. And fourth, something stranger. The bodies themselves often refuse to leave the mountain. It sounds mystical, but it's true. They freeze in place, fuse into the ice, become part of the slope. To free them, climbers would have to chip away at solid ice for hours in the death zone, where every extra minute is a step closer to death. That's why Everest has an unspoken rule: the dead remain where they fell. It sounds heartless, but climbers see it differently. For them, the mountain is a final resting place. Those who die on Everest remain with it forever. It is an honorable grave, the highest grave on Earth. One well-known climber once said, "Sometimes the best way to honor the dead is to leave them where they wanted to be." Hannelore wanted to be on Everest. She achieved that, and she stayed there forever. But why did it all go wrong? Why did such an experienced team end up in disaster? To understand that, you have to look at the people, at their characters, their choices. The expedition of 1979 was a collision of 4 very different personalities, and each played a role in the tragedy. Hannelore Schmatz, the rationalist, an engineer through and through. He plans everything ahead of time, calculates the risks, follows the rules. When he reaches the summit, he checks his watch, the weather, the snow. He sees the danger, and he makes the only right choice: descend immediately. He doesn't give in to emotion. He doesn't let euphoria cloud his judgment. The summit isn't the finish line. It's only halfway. Real success is coming back alive. Ghard understands that, and that's why he survives. Hannelore is the complete opposite. She is driven by ambition, by dreams, by emotion. For her, Everest isn't just a mountain. It's a chance to enter history, to become a legend, to prove that women can do everything men can. She hears Gerhard's warning. She sees the snow, the danger, but she can't stop. The summit is so close, just a little farther. Her will, her determination, carry her to the top of the world. But they also seal her fate. She can't turn back. She can't admit that this day isn't hers. Her ambition outweighs her instinct for survival. Ray Jenne, the veteran, the legend. He has climbed dozens of the hardest routes. He knows the mountains like no one else, but he is 50 years old. And even all that experience can't fight age. The body is slower to recover. The reserves are thinner. Ray knows it's dangerous to linger, but he is a guide. His job is to bring his clients to the summit, and he does it, to the end. Even at the cost of his life. He could have turned the group around, could have insisted on descending, but he didn't. Maybe he thought he could handle it. Maybe he didn't want to disappoint Hannelore. His experience tells him this is risky, but his sense of duty proves stronger. And then there are the Sherpas, Sundar, and the others. For them, Everest is work. They live at the foot of this mountain. They climb it dozens of times. They earn their living helping foreigners reach the summit. They know the risks better than anyone. They've seen death many times, but they have no choice. It's the only way to feed their families. Sundar stays with Hannelore until the very end, even when he knows she won't make it, even when his own life hangs by a thread. He loses his fingers. He is left disabled for life, but he fulfills his duty. He tries to save her until the last possible moment. Do you see the pattern? In the mountains, character decides fate. Gerhard's rationality saves him. Hannelore's ambition destroys her. Ray's experience can't overcome his age. Sundare's loyalty cripples him, but it keeps him alive. Each of them makes choices shaped by who they are, and those choices decide who comes back and who remains on the mountain forever. The tragedy of 79 wasn't an accident. It was the result of human character colliding with extreme conditions. Some proved stronger than circumstance, others did not. The mountain doesn't care. It doesn't honor heroes or punish cowards. It simply exists, cold, eternal, indifferent. And people come to it with their dreams, their fears, their ambitions. Each one receives what they earn, or what fate decides. The line between the two is so thin, it's almost impossible to see. Hannelore Schmatz returned from Everest as a hero, the oldest person ever to reach the summit. His name was in newspapers, on television. Germany celebrated his triumph, but for him, it was no victory. He told journalists, "The team came back, but I returned alone." Imagine that, achieving the greatest goal of your life, standing on the roof of the world, and just hours later, your wife dies on the slope, and there's nothing you can do. Gerhard descended alone. He passed the place where Hannelore sat. He saw her, knew she wouldn't survive, but he kept walking, because if he stopped, they both would die. That choice haunted him for the rest of his life. Friends said that after Everest, he was never the same. Closed off, quiet. Once he had been the life of the party, joking, laughing, telling expedition stories. Now he preferred silence, but he didn't give up the mountains. Quite the opposite. He kept climbing, again and again. In the 80s and 90s, he summited all 7 of the highest peaks on each continent. Kilimanjaro in Africa, Aconcagua in South America, Elbrus in Europe, Vinson in Antarctica, Kosciuszko in Australia, Denali in Alaska, and once again, Everest in Asia, the 7 summits, the classic list. But Gerhard went further. He climbed the second highest peaks of each continent, Mount Kenya, Ojos del Salado, Dik Tau, Mount Tyree, Puncak Jaya, Mount Logan, 7 plus 7, 14 ascents. Why? Why would a man who lost his wife in the mountains keep going back? Psychologists call it repetition therapy. When trauma is so deep that the only way to cope is to return to the source of pain, again and again, until it loses its power over you. Maybe Gerhard wanted to prove to himself that he could control the mountains, that the tragedy of 79 was the exception, not the rule, or maybe he simply couldn't stop. Because the mountains were the only place he still felt close to Hannelore, the only place she was still with him. He never remarried. He spent the rest of his life alone, working as an engineer in Munich, climbing, returning. In an interview in the 90s, he was asked, "Do you regret that expedition?" He stayed silent for a long time, then answered, "I regret that I couldn't stop her, but she would never have forgiven me if I had tried." Hannelore had dreamed of the summit all her life, and Gerhard knew if he had stood in her way, she would have hated him for it. Better to lose her to the mountain than to lose her forever as an enemy. A cruel choice, but the only one possible. The shadow of the tragedy followed Gerhard to the end of his days. Friends recalled that every time he set out into the mountains, he would pause for a moment, look upward, say something under his breath. No one ever knew what it was, but everyone understood. He was speaking to Hannelore. More than 40 years have passed since that tragedy, Everest has changed beyond recognition. Back in 1979, it was the age of pioneers, heavy gear, primitive clothing, no communication. You were alone with the mountain. If something went wrong, no one was coming to help. Now it's different. Modern expeditions are high-tech operations. Ultralight carbon tents, down suits that can handle 50 below, oxygen masks with precise flow control, satellite phones work even on the summit. A climber can call home from the roof of the world, tell his wife, "I'm here, I'm fine." Helicopters can reach as high as Camp 2. Rescue teams wait in base camp around the clock. Health monitors track pulse, blood pressure, oxygen levels. If anything looks wrong, an alert goes straight to the expedition coordinator. The routes are fixed with ropes, ladders span the crevasses, markers guide the way. In some places, there are even emergency shelters stocked with oxygen and food. It might seem Everest has become safer, but the numbers say otherwise. In 1979, 4 people died on the mountain. In 2023, it was 17. 17. Why? The gear is better, the technology more advanced, decades of experience to draw from. But one thing has changed, the illusion of safety. Modern climbers believe technology makes up for a lack of skill. That GPS can replace knowing the route, that a satellite call will save them in a crisis. They're wrong. Everest is not an amusement ride. It's one of the most dangerous places on Earth. No technology can change that. The mountain is no safer. Only the illusion of safety has changed. And now, people climb Everest who never would have dared in the 70s. Businessmen, doctors, teachers, they pay $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 for an expedition. Hire guides. Join the line of climbers waiting for their turn at the summit. Yes, traffic jams. At 8,800 meters, there are literal bottlenecks. Dozens of people lined up, waiting their turn for the summit. And every minute of waiting means losing heat, oxygen, strength. In 2019, a photo of such a line went viral, a long chain of climbers snaking toward the top. It looked like people waiting outside a store. Except here, the cost of delay was life itself. 11 people died that season, most from exhaustion and hypothermia. They simply waited too long. Technology creates a false sense of control. GPS can pinpoint your location, but it can't predict an avalanche. A satellite phone may connect, but it won't help if your legs give out at 8,000 meters. An oxygen mask can buy you time, but it won't make you invincible. The mountain hasn't changed. It's the same as it was 1,000 years ago. Cold, ruthless, indifferent to human life. What has changed are the people, more confident, convinced they can buy safety. That money and technology can give them control over nature, but nature isn't for sale. And Everest proves that every year. Everest never forgets. It keeps its dead, in the snow, in the ice, in the frozen earth. They become its guardians, its memory, and every climber who passes them understands. This is no attraction. This is where dreams collide with reality, where ambition meets the laws of nature, where the price of the summit is, sometimes, life itself. If this story resonated with you, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what story you'd like to hear next.